Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Hub World Podcast. Today's episode will have us covering the 2D platforming essentials. My name is Jules, and today I am joined by
Matteo
and Gino.
Whether you're joining us from YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, be sure to like and subscribe. Actually, before we get the discussion going, why don't I introduce you to this game type, or reintroduce you to this game type? So if you are a longtime listener, you will remember that last year we had a wonderful series called the Console Essentials, where we looked at various Nintendo consoles and we debated what the essential games were. And what we would do is we would create a nomination list, and then we would try to break that down to an essentials list and kind of have that discussion. It was very successful. We've been shopping around the idea of doing something similar and bringing it back, and we landed on the idea of doing gaming genre essentials. So essentially, we're going to take a gaming genre or a subgenre of gaming, and we're going to share some of our favorite games and some of the best games we think belong in that category. Same kind of thing, make a little nomination list, and then we're going to break it down to a number of essentials. Now, unlike our console essentials, the number won't always be 5. It may be different depending on the genre. But for today, we are doing 2D platformers, specifically non-Metroidvania 2D platformers. We are intending to do a Metroidvania and a 3D platformer genre essentials in the future, but today we are just focusing on 2D platformers, and we are going to debate it down to 5 essentials. So we're going to get that discussion started. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Would anybody like to begin?
Yes, I would. I would like to nominate Hero Klungo Saves to Universe.
That is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful nomination. I don't know. Can we consider it?
No, we can't. It's a mini game in nuts and bolts. I just thought of it right now, and I'm like, you know what? This would be a great way to have a little bit of fun right at the beginning here. Get some people laughing, get the energy going, and just having a good time.
If I'm being honest, though, Gino, that is the most honorable of mentions.
I guess I'll start with my first pick. I'm sort of getting out of a dark age of platforming for me, where I just could not look at a 2D platformer for almost a decade, really. In the Wii U generation, I'd say from 2014 to realistically last year, I just could not play 2D platformers. I just felt like there were just so many that came out within a certain period of time. I bought a whole bunch and never played.
Cough, new Super Mario Bros.
Well, I kind of attribute it to that, but the last real 2D platformer I played and I thoroughly enjoyed from beginning to end was, I think, 2013 to 2014. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I played the Wii U version with Riley, and we played that game in one sitting from beginning to end. It was such a blast. I remember even playing it at Best Buy when Nintendo did their Wii U demos where they had all those games. And we played Tropical Freeze then, and we had so much fun. He said, when this game comes out, we're going to marathon it, and we did. And I think for my money, it's the best Donkey Kong Country game from a level design perspective. David Wise came back to do the soundtrack, and he's one of Rare's legendary composers, and he did not skip a beat for Tropical Freeze. I love the winter aesthetic. You have 4 playable characters with DK, Diddy, Dixie, and Cranky, and then later on you have Funky in the Switch version, which I want to pick up eventually because I haven't really played Tropical Freeze since. A lot of Donkey Kong Country games tend to be on the more difficult side, and at least in my opinion. Tropical Freeze didn't seem that way. Maybe because I was doing multiplayer for the entire time. I don't know, but there's just so much fantasticness crammed into Tropical Freeze, and it's a beautiful game. It still holds up visually to this day, and it's a shame that it's the last Donkey Kong Country game that's been released. I really hope that more come out in the future. There's rumors another one might. But yeah, Tropical Freeze for now, I'm going to put as my first nomination. Arguably my favorite 2D platformer of all time.
Yeah, very, very good nomination.
Yeah.
I kind of echo a lot of what you said. And just, the one thing I will disagree with you on, I think that game is real tough. I don't think that game is easy, and I think it's harder on multiplayer.
I forgot to mention Woodkong, the greatest Kong of all's in that
Yes,
game.
Woodkong.
I'll throw up a picture of Woodkong right here if I can find
Yeah,
one.
Woodkong's a good one. Okay, I'll give a nomination. So, I mean, there's a couple series here that I think we're going to get multiple games mentioned in the series because they're stronger 2D platformer series. And I think Donkey Kong could potentially be one of those. However, I do want to shift gears to a series that I think only has one option for nomination, and that option is a incredibly great game. And I actually think this is one of the most classic and brilliant platformers of all time, and that is Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. I have nothing but incredible things to say about the original Yoshi game. They have never hit that height again. Like the other Yoshi platformers are great. Like Woolly World is good. Crafted
Shout out to
World
Woolly
is
World.
good. They're good games, but the original Yoshi's Island is just incredible. It is perfect. It is such a strong platformer. Aesthetically, very, very cute. Like it's the first time we really got to see like Yoshi's like full personality. And yeah, that's all I can really say about it is just like great boss battles, fantastic level design, a ton of like world diversity, and then like the bonus games were fun. There was lots to collect. There was lots to accomplish in each world. Very strong game.
I think I'll go for one of them also, kind of staying in and around the Mario universe. I know this is another oldie. Jules nominated Super Mario World 2. I'm going to go out and just nominate Super Mario World 1, the first one there. I want to say that was like one of the earliest games that I have memories with. Mm-hmm. Super Mario World is one of those tentpole kind of games, really pushing that, I want to say, the 2D platforming genre back in the early days. Without that, you wouldn't have had the sequels. You wouldn't have had any other types of platformers, at least in my opinion. It's just simple. Run, jump, and you get like some basic power-ups. Yes, you can you get the super cape, which really put the super in Mario World. And just it's where we got to play as Yoshi for the first time. That was a feature that wasn't really able to be had back in the original Mario Brothers. And running around, finding out like, okay, you can go into the Star World, and they're like, so you can then play through the entire game and not even know that stuff is there. There was the hidden power up world behind the Donut Plains ghost house, and like for a younger kid, that was like, oh my god, I can go here and like stock up, get all my power ups, and then I can go and play the level any which way I want. And it was just a nice little quality of life thing. I have just a lot of fun memories, even like secret exits and stuff to levels and things. Like there's always something to do.
Yep, boo houses.
Yep,
or ghost houses, I guess. Those are like my favorite levels in 2D Mario games.
Yeah, they
and
are.
Then
They're
the
really
soundtrack
awesome.
is next level in Super Mario World as well. Like
interconnected map too. Like it's a strong game. And honestly, Gino, I'm glad you mentioned it because there was a long time where I believed Super Mario Bros. 3 was the peak, and I have since shifted my perception, and I do think Super Mario World is Mario at its best, and I agree with you.
And even when they re-released it in Super Mario All-Stars, they added a brand new sprite for Luigi that made him a little bit taller and distinct from Mario. I think that was like one of the first times where Luigi's actually was physically different, because or just being outside of just being a reskin.
It was Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World was the
that's the one I'm talking about.
But I feel like we also have to nominate Super Mario Bros. 3 just out of like obligation almost. Like I have so many wonderful memories playing that game with my cousin growing up. That was the first Mario game or first 2D platformer in my to my memory that had a world map. Tanuki Mario, Frog Mario, Karibo's Shoe, like all these fantastic like iconic things in Mario came from that game. The Angry Sun, the Koopalings first appeared in that game, with the Koopa Clown Car first appeared in that game. All these amazing level themes. Like you had the desert, you had clouds, you had airships, you had like all these things, like, and it was still running on the same machine that ran Super Mario Bros. Like Super Mario Bros. 3 pushed the NES to its limits. The whole like theater aesthetic is fantastic. I love the sub games with all the cards and things like that. Like
Toad's house was rigged.
Yeah, the warp whistle, like so many pieces of the Mario franchise originated in Mario 3, like just as many in 3 and in world. Like I think those games are so equal, and it just will
Yeah,
come down to preference. But like it's such a monumental game in Nintendo's history, in the history of the genre, and the history of the industry, and in my gaming history as well.
We'll throw them both on the short list. I definitely have thoughts of 3 versus World, but I will save that for when we are deliberating.
Yeah.
But you are right. Like 3 is a staple game. It is one of the first games with a world map, and it's a really strong platformer.
Dang, 3 games in, and we have 2 Mario games already, and I know there's at least room for 2 more.
We have technically 3 Mario games.
I mean, I actually disagree with that. I only think these 2 deserve to be on this list. But
really?
I will be nominating a game now because we've just done 4 Nintendo games. So let's take a break. I will be nominating Mario's greatest enemy, Sonic.
I wouldn't say greatest enemy.
Greatest enemy turned friend now, but at least during this time, like where I believe was, well, I guess for Sonic it's different. Anyway,
yeah, Sega v Nintendo.
I digress. Sonic has just as much of an impact as a 2D platformer as Mario does. I've already said this in previous podcasts. I do really think that there's 2 games from Sonic that you could nominate, and I do think that they are very equal. And I do think it comes down to preference, but my preference is Sonic Mania. I do think Sonic Mania is the best 2D platformer in Sonic's gaming library. I also think that it is the best representation of the series as a whole, with all of its highs packed right into one package. So I will be nominating Sonic Mania for that reason. And it's just, honestly, it's such a refreshing game. In this era, like Matteo said, of like kind of 2D platformer resurgence, there were a lot of middling games, and Sonic Mania was one of those ones that was such a high because it really captured a classic era, and not only captured it, but built on it, and that's what I appreciate about Sonic Mania as a game.
Yeah, I have Sonic Mania on my short list as well. As like, if I had to pick one Sonic game, it would be Sonic Mania. The fact that game was made by fans as well, like, it almost seemed like Sega kind of didn't really believe in that game to put their teams on it, so they hired outsiders to make it, and it's arguably the best. I don't actually, yeah, it's not arguably. It's the best 2D Sonic game. Is just that's honestly the best part in my opinion. And I love how they brought back forgotten Sonic characters like the Sonic the Fighters OCs. Like I don't think Sega would have done that if they had made the game. And like this creativity and like Studiopolis Zone is fantastic. Like the bosses are not too difficult, not too easy. There's just a happy medium for a lot of critical pieces of design for Sonic games. They just nailed it. And I really wish they had made, like that team had made a sequel. But we got Sonic Superstars. I haven't played it yet, but I can't see it being anywhere near as good as Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
So
I would have thought that Sonic 3 and Knuckles would have been on there. I know Mania is good and all, but like I don't know, there's something about like the OG games that like had a specific kind of like charm and stuff. Yes, they may not have aged as well, but I don't know. Then again, like I didn't play it, so I can't really go out and nominate a Sonic game. Like,
I mean, I can tell you right now, like this is a really good time to like differentiate if we're not going to nominate it. But I can tell you from my perspective, Gino, the reason I didn't put Sonic 3 and Knuckles, even though I think it's equal, I think Sonic Mania and Sonic 3 and Knuckles are just as good as each other. But I think the reason I chose Sonic Mania is because Sonic Mania has the best parts of Sonic 3 and Knuckles in it, plus the best parts of Sonic 2, Sonic 1, and a ton of cool original stuff. And that's why I would say Sonic Mania is better, because it does take the best parts of the previous games and builds its own stuff and builds upon it. And that's why I prefer Sonic Mania, because it is kind of an anniversary game. So that's me. Like I think Sonic 3 and Knuckles, while it has tons of highs, does have a few zones that are a little low, whereas Sonic Mania I don't think has any low zones.
I can accept that. Yeah, like again, like this is also coming from me who like the most amount of time in a 2D Sonic game I played was probably Sonic Advance. And that's probably nowhere near on anyone's radar.
As good as those games are, I don't think they would be.
Oh yeah, they don't hold a candle to any of the other ones.
They need to be re-released.
They are good games. They are strong games. Does anybody have another nomination?
I'd like to nominate one, and this is just purely based off of my enjoyment of this game with you guys. Is certainly Kirby Return to Dreamland, and what's the one with the three elemental girls or whatever they were, like the lightning one, the blizzard one,
Kirby
the fire
Star
one.
Allies.
Would those count for this? Because like I know
Yes,
Kirby
absolutely. Those are absolutely 2D platformers. I would agree. I actually do have Return to Dreamland on my shortlist as well.
And just for the sake of discussion, I think we should bump it up to Return to Dreamland Deluxe, because that is the best version of that game.
Yeah.
They added the 2 new copy abilities. They added this beautiful art style, and they added the Megalore bonus epilogue. Like, it's the best version of the best Kirby game.
Yeah, and I'm going to say Return to Dreamland also. I was getting them confused in my head for just because like we played both of them. I think when we were playing Return to Dreamland, Jules, we were at your place and like we were just having just so much fun with just doing silly little voices for each of the characters. It was just good fun and great couch co-op. The game was great. It was not too difficult, not too hard, but in classic Kirby fashion, like going back and doing the more like end gamey kind of activities, going for the 100%. Did prove a challenge, and it was like I believe like in the OG Hub World videos when we were talking about like the Kirby bosses and things like that. That was like one of our like early videos.
It performed well. Like Kirby has a big storied like connection to our group of friends because Kirby Return to Dreamland was one of the first games we played all through together. And what I've always appreciated about Kirby Return to Dreamland as well, because it's my favorite Kirby game as well, which is why I pushed us all to play it. I had already played it, and I remember hunting that game down because it was hard to find. But what I always appreciate about that game, and why I'll always like it better than, like, say, Star Allies, is that the hard mode is hard. It's hard. It's one of the few Kirby games that actually has an authentically difficult version of it, and that's what we played together. And Kirby is fantastic as a game that you could just chill and have fun with, and that's what I appreciate about the series. But what I loved about Kirby Return to Dreamland was like I got that chill experience, and then I got this painful, difficult experience with it, and I loved it. I love that you could have it both ways.
I don't know, like I wouldn't really call it like painful because like Kirby games aren't like, okay, they're not like Dark Souls level difficult, but like for a 2D platformer that's like a fun cutesy Nintendo game, yes, I would say.
I mean, I don't know if you remember how many times we died, but that was a tough game.
I don't remember it being overly difficult. I just remember like all the fun that we were having with it and just like those silly moments and stuff.
But we did die quite a bit. Maybe not like you're not like Dark Souls level, but we definitely, it was a challenge at least, and challenge is always nice.
So I'll nominate another challenging game. Some may say it could be impossible. This game is impossible in my eyes. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. A game that seemingly came out of nowhere and immediately became one of my most anticipated games of, I believe it was 2019 is when it came out. And the first Yooka-Laylee is a mixed bag to most people. I really enjoyed that game for what it was. I'm a massive Banjo-Kazooie fan, and this is Playtonic's second outing, and I think without a doubt, like, this game is better than the original Yooka-Laylee. I know it's a different genre, but, like, I think this is the type of quality we should expect from Playtonic going forward, because the core of that studio made Banjo-Kazooie, but the Banjo-Kazooie team also was the Donkey Kong Country team. So these guys worked on Donkey Kong Country as well, and that's the type of platformer that Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is. Very similar to Donkey Kong Country with the abilities that Yooka and Laylee have. The music is also done by David Wise, who worked on Donkey Kong Country, and Grant Kirkhope, who is most famous for doing Banjo-Kazooie. The world map is incredible in Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, basically having 3D puzzles and all these interactive things that just really enhance the experience. And I think, in my opinion, it's the best world map in any 2D platformer to this day. And I think that even includes Mario Wonder, which has a very good one as well.
Yeah.
And then the Impossible Lair itself, like, it's the first thing you do in the game. It's technically possible to beat it with the one hit point you have. But as you go through each level, you collect bees, and those bees count as hit points that can help you tackle the Impossible Lair. And you can do that whenever you want throughout the game again. But I beat that game I got all the bees. I got all the collectibles. I just could not beat the impossible layer, even with all the hit points that I had. And that's something to this day that still haunts me. But I love this game to death. I bought it again for Switch because the Switch version or just a physical copy of this game is kind of tough to find these days. And I really want to play it again. And I just hope that Playtonic releases whatever they're working on next for Yooka-Laylee soon, because
They need
this
to do it.
game just really, really, really quenched the thirst that I didn't think I had for these types of like Donkey Kong Country-esque platformers, and I just want them. I want to see what they could do next, both in 3D and in 2D.
Yeah, I had this game on my list as well. Like, this is a very, like, out of nowhere, nobody asked for this platformer that, like, was incredibly impressive.
I remember watching Matteo just getting so mad whenever he would attempt the impossible layer. It's like, it's literally the last thing I have to do. Why can't it happen?
It's the only
It
achievement I
is
don't have
challenging.
is beating it. Like, I have everything
Well,
else in that game.
One day you got to go back and beat it. I will throw in another recommendation or another nomination. Another very challenging game in a somewhat challenging platforming series, but no nomination list when we're talking about 2D platformers would be complete without the presence of Mega Man. And I am personally a Mega Man 3 fan, although there are a lot, like, you could pretty much nominate like at least half of the Mega Man games as the representative. I personally connect most with Mega Man 3. It is my favorite game. Has the strongest platforming in my opinion. Although, if I'm being honest, I have exclusively played Mega Man games in a collection, which means I played them one after another, so they all kind of meld together. So I can't tell you specifically why I'm choosing Mega Man 3 over the other ones, because in my mind, they're all kind of melded together, but I do know that this is the one I've played the most. It is also the first one I played. I'm also most impressed by this one, so Mega Man 3 is my nomination to represent Mega Man, which, in my opinion, is one of the best platformers. It's very much precision platforming a lot of the time. It's quite punishing at times as well, but it also has strong combat, right, which you don't always get from platformers. And I think that's something that Mega Man kind of has over things like Sonic and Mario, where the combat is jump on things 3 times and they die. Or in Sonic's case, spin, jump at things like 6 times and then they die. So Mega Man 3.
The whole Mega Man series, like everything, Mega Man X, like basically everything except Battle Network is like the biggest blind spot in my 2D platforming.
I mean, we did play Mega Man 1 for a bit, and when I was younger, I was just like, this is too difficult. I'm not going to bother. And then I didn't.
Mega Man 1 is very difficult, I'll just say. Mega Man 2 and 3 are a bit more forgiving, but Mega Man 1 is quite difficult.
What about Mega Man X, though?
I do like Mega Man X. I've only played the first 3 Mega Man X games. I personally am not going to nominate Mega Man X because I haven't played them enough, and I also just, again, like this kind of goes just with my personal opinion. I prefer Mega Man, like base Mega Man, because I find that base Mega Man is more focused on platforming, whereas Mega Man X is still, it's focused on platforming, but there's more combat because the combat system's much deeper. But for me, I prefer base Mega Man in the platforming because it's a simple platformer, and I feel like Mega Man X gets a little complicated, and that's just my personal preference. I don't think Mega Man X is in any way worse. Like, many people would likely say that Mega Man X or a Mega Man X game is better than all of Mega Man, like the base series, but I personally prefer the base series.
I would like to go out and nominate another Kirby game. This is one that I played single player. It was for the DS, if I remember correctly, and that is Kirby Squeak Squad. Great music, great abilities, and just a whole lot of fun and character. I loved the Squeaks as enemies and how they would kind of like chase after you, and Kirby had to go and upgrade abilities and get scrolls and things. Just all around great game.
I only have one more, and this one is another sort of game that came out of the blue for me, and it had a really weird development history because Rayman Legends was supposed to be a Wii U exclusive game, and we all know how the Wii U turned out. Ubisoft got cold feet and decided to make that game multi-platform. And as a weird Nintendo fan in 2013. I'm like, you know what? Screw Ubisoft. I'm not buying this game. And then actually that turned out to be a good decision on my part because I got it for free as a game with gold. And that's how I played it on my Xbox One. I believe it was one of the first games with gold that came out for Xbox One, maybe 2014, 2013, I want to say, which actually probably is the year it came out. But yeah, I just went in this game with no expectations. And I later have gone like I've gone on and played Rayman Origins, but I just find that Rayman Legends is just by far the better of the two games. And not for like anything it does uniquely. I just think that the stuff that it does is just like it's just slightly better than Rayman Origins and it just compounds, right? Like I love the music levels. I love the
Yeah.
what's his name? What's the frog guy's name?
Glowbox.
No, not Glowbox. No, the other guy. He was
Oh, the green guy,
Yeah.
not the blue guy.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine playing that game on Wii U. That must have been so annoying having him there. I'm forgetting on his name, but like just having
I know what you're talking about, Murphy.
Yeah.
Murphy.
Murphy as a button instead of like touch controls, that is a godsend. And then just it's how the animation in that game and the just the art style that they chose, like it's a real shame that there hasn't been another Rayman game, I think, since that, like a non-Rabbids
Yeah.
game, because I think this is one of the most criminally underrated 2D platformers of all time. Like, every time I see a list of like best 2D platformers, I rarely see Rayman even mentioned. And like Rayman
Really?
Legends is just so good.
That's shocking to me because when we decided to do this list, one of the first games that came to my mind was Rayman Legends.
Mhm.
Like literally one of the first games. I think it's one of the most stellar platform because that's the thing is I break up platformers into two very different categories. There's ones that are fun because they're fun and they're like well designed, and there's ones that are in my opinion great because they offer a lot of challenge and they like push the genre in a technical area. And I think Rayman Legends is one of the best of the prior one that I said. It's one of the best ones that's like there for fun and like yeah, there's some challenge. It's not a cakewalk like a Kirby game, and it's not maybe as like tough as like a Mega Man game, but it finds a striking balance of being fun, cool, wacky that is challenging enough that it doesn't feel like unearned, but is not difficult enough where you feel like frustrated. Like it's a very good balance of like you're going to die a few times throughout the levels, maybe do a few platforming challenges a few times. And one of the things I really love about it is, and I'm surprised other 2D platformers haven't taken this from Rayman Legends, because I think is one of the most brilliant things, is because a lot of 2D platformers have kind of taken on the collectibles route of like having a collectible that's used as a currency to get like extra stuff. However, what I love about Rayman Legends is that when you get one of those collectibles, you have to be on solid ground for like 3 to 5 seconds before you actually earn it. So you can't do something like in Mario where you just like suicide to get it and then it just respawns you and you got it. Like you have to like you have to complete the platforming challenge. You have to have like done the platforming challenge to get the big coin and then successfully gotten to safety in order for you to keep it. Whereas I feel like a lot of other 3D or 2D platformers don't do that. They allow you to like basically just sacrifice a life to get the collectible. And I hate that because to me the transaction feels shallow.
Yeah, because then you're not actually mastering the content; you're just cheesing it. It's like even
Yeah.
in Mario Wonder, Matteo and I, we played the entire game, save for the last level in co-op, like the final level. And there were points where like I would hit the flagpole and Matteo was dead, but I didn't get the top of the flagpole, so he would fly into me and then get that free jump boost and then hit the top of the flagpole, and then we wouldn't have to redo the level to get top of the flagpole.
Yeah. See, I understand why it's there, but like I appreciate Rayman Legends for like pushing you to like actually try the platforming challenges, you know?
Yeah, that's my last nomination.
I'd like to take a crack at why people don't recognize it nearly as much, and I think it's because of the Wii U curse, right? Because a lot of the marketing material and stuff for that game was like, oh, Wii U, Wii U, Wii U, and then Wii U was not good. So people didn't give it a chance.
It also just came out in a time where that just wasn't a desirable genre, and it was really before the big like indie platform 2D platformer boom that came. in that gen, like just slightly after Rayman Legends came out.
I think I know there's a game that Jules is going to mention that hasn't been said yet.
I have 4 potential games to mention. I'm probably only going to mention 3 because I don't want to I don't want to fill up this list with games that only I've played. However, there are 3 that I think are worth mentioning. So if that's okay, if I could just mention all 3, because I think they should be at least be mentioned for the short list. If you know anything about me, like if you've listened to our previous podcasts, you definitely know what one of them is. But I'm going to start with the one that you probably don't know, which is Braid. Braid is an exceptional 2D platformer. It came out during the 360 PS3 era. I
I've
believe
heard of
it
it.
may have. Yeah, I think it might have been exclusive to Xbox Live Arcade. Now, this game is incredible. It is incredible as a platformer. It's a puzzle platformer in the sense that it is so that the whole concept of the game is time. So a lot of the platforming is around like doing a platforming challenge, but also like reversing time or speeding time up in order to make your platforming like fit with other platformers. You're almost like creating doppelgangers of yourself to complete like a challenge. So it's really exceptional, and it also has like this incredible commentary as well, because there's kind of like a story that you piece together throughout it, and it's very artsy in that kind of way, but the actual gameplay is phenomenal. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend this one because it's not challenging in like a precision way. Like anybody could beat Braid if you stick with it and you try, and it'll feel satisfying, and it's really really great. It's not too long of a game either, so really great game. The second one I want to throw on here, these next 2 are actually what I think to be 2 of the best platformers of all time. The first one is Shovel Knight.
Yep, there it is.
Shovel Knight Treasure Trove Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is kind of being a cop out because it includes like 4 campaigns. But even if we only look at the base campaign, to me, Shovel Knight is what Sonic Mania is, but to Mega Man, like in a way. Shovel Knight is like this love letter to classic platformers like Mega Man, and it's just it's so incredible. The soundtrack, the gameplay, the boss battles, like it is again like one of those games where it finds this nice balance, like Rayman Legends, where it's not too challenging, but it also isn't a cakewalk. Like you are going to have to try pretty hard, and there is a big combat element in there. There's a sense of progression. There's light RPG elements. And then if you play the other campaigns as well, there's different focuses on different types of platforming. Like Spectre Knight's campaign is very much about like wall jumping, and King Knight's campaign is very much about like jumping on top of what's the right way to describe it? It's almost like if you're like bouncing off of thing to thing to thing to thing before you can land. So there's a lot of variety within the platforming if you play the entire game, and it's a really incredible game, just from all senses of the word. And then the last one is the one where, again, I think that it's one of the best platformers of all time, but this one is definitely acquired taste because it is highly precision platforming, and that's Celeste, which is an incredible, like technically wonderful game that really pushes every single boundary of precision platforming. It takes that concept that Super Meat Boy created about like taking like creating a level that's a bunch of small platforming challenges lined up with each other, so it's never like a full level. You never have to restart a full level. There's no focus on like if I lose all these lives, I have to restart a whole section. There's nothing like that. It's just little sections, little crazy hard platforming sections, and then when you finish each world, it says, "Here's how many times you died." And so it's more of a like you're just challenging yourself, and you're just improving and getting better. And I love platformers like that are all about just learning what the exact moment to hit the button and do the right thing is in each part of the platform challenge. And it has a very touching story. Again, those are 3 fantastic games.
I knew it wouldn't be a list of 2D platformers if Shovel Knight didn't appear somewhere, Jules. That is like your favorite thing ever.
Mm-hmm. Shovel Knight's incredible.
I'm gonna go back to it one day. Like I only got to the second, I think it's the second world or whatever you want to refer to it as in that game in Shovel of Hope, but for whatever reason, like that was like one of those games where it's like there was that, there was like 2 new Super Mario Bros. Games, there was Tropical Freeze, uh there was some Kirby games, there was Yoshi's Woolly World. Like it's just so many 2D platformers, and I just noped out of most of them.
Yeah. And
So
honestly, like even with like myself in 2D platformers, like I don't consider myself a 2D platformer gamer just because I don't know, it's just it didn't really like vibe check. But I was surprised about like how many of them like, oh yeah, I know this one. This one was fun. Oh yeah, I played that one. Based off
that's
of
what I was
this,
saying. Like
at least this list here, it's like it's one of those kind of like sleeper genres, I guess. Just like we play more of them than we think.
there's a lot of like really, really good 2D platformers that like if we're done with our nominations that like I would just want to shout out quickly because like and I know that other people have played them and I know that they're supposed to be good. I just haven't.
I want you to do that, but before you do that, can I address one thing? Because I think it's
Yep.
important for us to address it. And I'm going to address it from my perspective first. And if you two want to address it, you can. I need to address the elephant Mario in the room, which is that Mario Wonder just came out and was anticipated to be potentially the greatest 2D Mario platformer of all time. And I just want to say, when I first started the game, that's what I was saying. That's what I told everybody. The reason I couldn't nominate it for this list is by the end of the game, don't get me wrong, incredible game, fantastic, so happy I played it. I don't think it got any better from World 1 to World 8. It was the same game all the way through to me. There was no, like, I started it being like, wow, there's so much here. I'm so excited to see how much is in this game. And it turned out that there actually, like, everything was kind of on the table from the beginning of the game.
I disagree.
I was a little disappointed in that sense where I feel like the game didn't go as far as I wanted. And I felt like the game didn't impress me to the level of the classic Mario games. Still phenomenal, still loved the game, adored the game, really enjoyed some of the challenging levels, although it turns out that one of the apparently really hard levels I didn't find hard, so I kind of missed out on that one. But
You're just too good.
well, that's the thing, is when you play games like Celeste and Super Meat Boy, things like Mario Wonder aren't going to have much of a challenge for you. So maybe that comes from my choice of 2D platformers and the kind of games I play. Also, the Mario Maker levels I make, which are harder than anything in Mario Wonder. No,
Yeah.
they're fair. They're precision platforming. But anyway, I just wanted to address that elephant Mario of the game is fantastic. It is new. It is fresh. But I personally just couldn't nominate it because I don't think it is the best representative of its series. I don't even think it's one of the 2 best. I think the 2 best are the ones we nominated.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say the thing is though, Mario Wonder is also still very, very, very new. And will we be having this same kind of sentiment on another playthrough? Right? Like I'm assuming you played through it solo, Jules.
I did the first 2 worlds with my roommate, so I experienced the multiplayer a bit. But then he was away, so I went back and I did the whole game by myself.
Yeah, so Matteo and I did the entire game as 2-player, and then we even like got our dad in, and we were doing, and that was just pure like chaotic. There's just so many different things happening with everyone's like running around with power ups. People are constantly dying and being a little ghost and floating around, and it was very, very, very fun. But there were like I found myself kind of just like, oh, okay, like when I was at that moment of, oh, okay, this isn't going to add anything new or whatever, right? And then we got a Wonder Flower, and then suddenly we're running on the wall, and it turns into a top-down 2D platform, 2D kind of like isometric kind of like run around maze. And I'm like, I was not expecting that. And then we got to another portion where like, oh, okay, you're a Goomba now. So this is strictly just, okay, run around and like make sure that you're not going to get squished or like you have one hit and you can't jump. And just like, I found like those moments like happened, and they were like almost like those kind of like wonderful Mario Wonder moments, I'll call them, happened at the right times, like right when you were having like, oh, okay, this is just another 2D Mario game where yada yada yada, this something, and then something odd would happen, and then it was just enough for me at least to keep me. I'm like, you know what? There's still a lot of surprises here.
It's very easily the best 2D Mario game since Mario World, but like I said, that's not really even like a competition. It's that by default, right? But for me, the only reason I'm not nominating it is because it's just so fresh in my mind, and I want to go back and play it single player and see how I feel about it. Because I have issues with the way the camera works in multiplayer, how like it focuses on one person, and it's not like I wish the bubble system was like New Super Mario Bros. Where there wasn't a timer on it, but I just want to see how that game is in single player just so I have the full experience. But other than that, like I loved Mario Wonder. So
Yeah, we had a lot of
but
fun.
I don't anticipate myself thinking it's better than 3 or World, but at least it's somewhat able to be at the table with those two games. But it's still too early.
Some honorable mentions.
And these aren't games that I've necessarily played, but they're ones that I know are like standout 2D platformers. Like I know the DuckTales. I guess DuckTales Remastered is the newest one. I don't know if it's like any better or worse than the original DuckTales, but I know that is supposed to be a phenomenal game, as well as the Lion King one is, and Aladdin are like they're very famous. Especially Lion King is just famous for its difficulty, but there is a good game there.
We hit a few of the Kirby games. But you really liked Robobot.
Yeah, Robobot's good.
Good because it's just so different from the other Kirby games.
Nightmare in Dreamland is really good.
I wanted to talk about Yoshi's Woolly World. I love Yoshi's Woolly World just because of how visually that game is incredible and those special levels are so tough in my
So good.
opinion.
So good.
Like, yeah, that's where the game like really takes off and just I loved collecting all the pieces of yarn to make new skins, scanning all my amiibos, giving those a purpose. I know there was those Ninja Turtles platformers, but like those are fantastic games as well. Like I really want to try the Cowabunga collection because I hear so many good things about those classic Ninja Turtle platformers. There's just the genre is so rich, especially there's like we've barely scraped the surface. Like
we
2D
really
platformers
haven't.
are like we're the prevalent genre of game in the NES and Super Nintendo era. Like arguably, so like I don't think there'll ever be a way for us to like equally represent everything like as it should be.
Yeah,
But
definitely not. I'll give one more honorable mention before we go in, which is the one I considered nominating and then just didn't, which is Little Nightmares 2, which is like a horror kind of, again, like more puzzle platformy, but really great game if you haven't played the Little Nightmares game. They just announced the third one a couple months ago, and it looks really good. Gives Coraline vibes if you've seen that movie or read that book.
Alrighty, let's get into this.
Let's deliberate. So we are going to deliberate down to 5. Yeah, sorry. So we can recap. We are going to cut this down to 5, but we have 13 nominations right now. So we have Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World, Super Mario Bros. 3, Sonic Mania, Kirby Return to Dreamland, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, Mega Man 3, Kirby Squeak Squad, Rayman Legends, Braid, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and Celeste. So we're going to shave down the list now to 5. Now, I personally think that there's an easy way to shave this down a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we're representing this genre as a genre, that I don't think 2 games in one series should be on this list, like at the final 5. So I think because we have 2 Super Mario games and we have 2 Kirby games, it only makes sense to shave at least those down first and be like, okay, what's going to represent these series? At least to get it to then 11, and then we can go from there.
I can give my votes right now. Super Mario World and I will say Kirby Return to Dreamland are the shoe-ins for me, just because Super Mario World as a game, I at least feel is more visually appealing. It's more colorful. It's on the Super Nintendo, more powerful system, better music in my opinion, fuller world, and just more of an actualized setting in my opinion. And then for Kirby Return to Dreamland, not for anything, it's just that I have better memories in that. And I like both those games. It's just that playing it multiplayer with you guys, the way that Nintendo wanted everyone to play that game in like a couch co-op setting, was the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree with both of those picks. It really pains me to not really be able to have both Mario 3 and Mario World, because those are both like cream of the crop 2D platformers. But if we're going to do the one per series route, for sure I would put Kirby's Return to Dreamland over Squeak Squad, and I would pick Mario World over Mario 3, but that's just painful to do so. Like, I would pick Mario 3 over the majority of the list that we have here.
Yeah, like I also agree with Kirby. I actually don't think that one's a competition at all. Kirby Return to Dreamland's better, but at least from my perspective, I don't think Super Mario Bros. 3 should be on this list. And the reason I personally think that is because even though both of these games are fantastic, if we're creating an essentials list to identify this genre, I feel like a lot of the arguments that were brought up about Super Mario Bros. 3 were arguments of why it is this fundamental Mario game, but we're not arguing like a Mario list. We're arguing like a platforming list. And even though Super Mario Bros. 3 is still a stellar platformer, I think Super Mario World is everything Super Mario Bros. 3 is, but better. And in that sense, it makes more sense for me looking at the diversity of this genre to say, okay, well let's put the one that has the exact same things but more.
That's a good way to look at it, I guess.
Yeah, I think I think if this was a Mario list, I do actually think like if this was a different context, I think I would even argue that Super Mario Bros. 3 might be better than World in certain capacities. But I do think when we're arguing just about platformers, I think we do have to bring it down a little bit to like what is the technically what is the best in gameplay wise, and therefore I would probably say most of what Super Mario Bros. 3 has on Super Mario World is specifically about its impact on its series, not so much its way that it's like held up as a 2D platform. Even though it has held up, it's the other game is the improvement. Like the other game is the better version of it.
But are we all in agreement that Mario World has to be on the list, like of the 5?
I would argue yes.
I agree. I think Super Mario World is a shoe-in. You cannot even mention 2D platformer as a genre without mentioning Super Mario. And if this is the game that we've selected to represent this series as the peak of the series, it absolutely is one of the 5 essential 2D platformers.
Yep.
Yeah, so we are down to now 10 remaining to fit into 4 slots, which is actually quite challenging.
I will make this even more difficult by maybe suggesting that Kirby Return to Dreamland should be put on the list purely because it offers a diverse gameplay experience because it is more focused on multiplayer and having a good couch co-op scene. Most of these games, like for instance, even Super Mario World, in my opinion, has one flaw where, yes, it is a multiplayer game, but you have to wait for the other player to lose a life and then switch to the player 2 controller to then have your turn. You can keep playing level after level until you lose a life again, to which it switches turns.
And I think your argument about multiplayer is very valid. And I think that's a very compelling argument. Here's my counter argument to this one.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that, like, again, we're representing the diversity of this genre. So, especially in modern 2D platformers, multiplayer is starting to become a common thing. So we should think about, like, what represents that best. I think while Kirby Return to Dreamland is very, very fun with people, I think Kirby Return to Dreamland, when you have extra people there, I've never felt like the Kirby multiplayer is anything but just like having more people on screen. Like, I don't really feel like you often have to work together to overcome things. I often feel like you have a bunch of people there and you're kind of like just going through the level together and experiencing it together. Whereas I feel like Rayman Legends and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze challenge the players to have to work together to complete the platforming challenges. And for me, I think both of those games offer a much more rewarding and I don't want to say challenging, but like rewarding and and offers more like focus on like teamwork than Kirby Return to Dreamland does. So for me, I think if I'm thinking about like which one represents the best of multiplayer 2D platforming, I would personally say it's Rayman Legends or Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And I don't know if I'm not saying that Kirby Return to Dreamland shouldn't be on the list. I personally don't know if I'm ready to put it on the list yet. Because to me, I actually think that's one of the lower half of the games on here.
Are we counting this as Return to Dreamland Deluxe?
I would say yes.
Yes.
Because if we do Deluxe, this is the entire Merry Megoland
That's not 2D platformers though. That's just mini games.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that's kind of the gray area of making this list, right? Like because it's a genre essentials list, right? And we're arguing within a genre, and I like this kind of goes back to what I was saying about World versus Super Mario Bros. 3. Like we have to just question. Like I'm not saying it has to be one way or the other. I don't want to create the rules or limit anything, but it's just a question to ask. Like Kirby Return of Dreamland has these extra things, so it might make it for example, a better game than some of the other ones in this list, but doesn't make it a better 2D platformer.
In that case, the Megalore epilogue could be considered, but not the party mode.
But you could consider it. It's up to you.
If I had to say, hey, if you just love the genre and you want to just do platforming, then that stuff shouldn't count.
Yeah, but at the same time, Yoshi's Island, Sonic Mania, and Shovel Knight Treasure Trove also have bonus games that aren't platforming focused.
I'm just saying Kirby offers a lot.
It does.
And albeit you can't really get a lot out of Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe if you lack one thing, and that thing being friends. Right? So if you have the friends to play it with, Return to Dreamland's a fantastic fun time. And Donkey Kong offers like a great experience also, but that's more of like a 2-player couch co-op, right?
I would say out of all these games, Kirby is the least fun to play by yourself.
Yeah,
Every
like
other game is perfect in single player and in multiplayer if it offers multiplayer.
Kirby is very chill, right? Like, and Kirby games are fantastic. I think what entices me, like if we're looking at multiplayer, like if we're just saying like, okay, let's represent multiplayer right now on this list.
Yeah, let's pivot towards that instead of just being Kirby.
Sure. So then the ones that offer multiplayer on this list, there's actually 5 of them. There's Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, there's Rayman Legends, there's Kirby Return to Dreamland, there's Sonic Mania, and there's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Now, kind of going back to what I said before, I think that of those 5 games, the only 2 that offer the idea of teamwork and like having to work collaboratively to complete platforming challenges are Rayman Legends and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, in my opinion. In Shovel Knight and in Sonic Mania, you're basically just an extra person. You're kind of like supplementing the player one. And in Kirby, it's just kind of like a free-for-all, and there doesn't need to be teamwork. You're just kind of all accomplishing everything together. Now, my argument is I think if we're purely thinking multiplayer and which one offers the best multiplayer experience, I think it's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And the reason I think that is because when you play Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze by yourself, Donkey Kong is attached to the characters of Diddy, Dixie, or Cranky that have these unique abilities that help you get through the levels in unique ways. However, when you play separately, the second player takes control of one of those characters. And you and the second player do not have the same set of abilities, and you have to work with each other to complete the platforming, because all the platforming is built around having the cooperation of Donkey Kong and his ally. And so when you separate them in a multiplayer setting, you actually have to rely on each other because you have different skills. It's not like Rayman Legends where if Gino's better than me at the game, he can complete all the platforming challenges and I could get him to kind of carry me through it because we have the same subset of skills. Like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze challenges both players to have to communicate and work in tandem, because you can't complete the game as just Donkey Kong or as just Diddy, Dixie, Cranky. You need to work together.
And also, just as a bit of a side thing, like, do you have the choice to play as Cranky, Diddy, Dixie?
Yes, you do. In the base game, like if you play by yourself, you don't. Depending on the level you're in, is who you get. But in the multiplayer, it does let you choose whoever you would like to. But I might be wrong. Don't quote me on this one.
Okay, because that's my only concern, because like you could get soft locked if that is the case. I don't want to invent a scenario.
You never get soft locked. There's no. I can remember the general experience of playing it, and there's no soft locking. I believe most of the platforming challenges, even though, like for example, like Cranky would be better suited for this situation, having any of the 3 can help you get through it. Like I don't think any of them Like in the single player version, they give you the one that's best equipped for it, but in the multiplayer version, all the challenges are built where Cranky Diddy or Dixie can help you get through it, but the level of difficulty is dependent on which one you have, because some of them are catered toward one of the characters, and if you chose that character, it's a bit easier.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's no way to be like Diddy and Cranky.
No,
No.
it's one of the big characters, Donkey or Funky, and one of the small characters, Diddy, Dixie, Cranky.
From what I did play of like even Donkey Kong Country Returns, it was very fun. So if that game is anything like that, and it doesn't even like it does the winter motif very well without dipping into Christmas, I feel like that's a good thing.
It's leagues better than Returns.
Yeah, it's quite better than Returns.
And I love like the idea of like the final world is the first world of the first game of Returns, where like you go back to the DK Island. Like that's so cool. The Snowmads or whatever, but like I think Tropical Freeze should be one of the 5 games. Everything about that game is incredible. Like Retro Studios really hit it out of the park with that game. Like they put a permanent stamp on the Donkey Kong franchise with that game. Like I feel like if that game came out now, like as like a brand new game, it would blow people away. But the fact that it first came out on Wii U kind of made it forgotten, but almost like it made it sort of like a hidden gem. And I still kind of think it is perceived to be a hidden gem a bit, because I don't think the Switch version of the game did amazing. It did well. It did better than the Wii U version, but like I would still count it as somewhat of a hidden gem, because like Donkey Kong never gets the same recognition of as Mario or even Kirby, really. Like Donkey Kong to me is definitely like my personal favorite of the Nintendo platformers.
I feel like Donkey Kong could go on, like based off just off of that, Donkey Kong could go on, but then like, oh, okay, would you also want to have Ukulele at that same time then at that point?
I think what we have to consider, because like I actually, when we went into this, I wasn't sure if I would have put Donkey Kong Country on this list, but I think what ultimately lands Donkey Kong's spot on the 5 is what you brought up, Gino, which is the multiplayer, right? Like we can't not acknowledge that multiplayer 2D platformers are a thing now, and if Donkey Kong Country is like, that's the reason I think it deserves to be on. I think it is the best representation of what multiplayer in a 2D platformer can and should be, and therefore that's why I think it's there. Like it has a ton of other reasons why it should be there. It's also a stellar platformer, like, and it's incredible in so many ways. But it is also the best representation of multiplayer in a 2D platformer, I think.
I can accept that. That's good.
So I think it's okay to put it there, and I think that there's still a place potentially for a game that's similar, like Ukulele and the Impossible Lair, but I think we should have those discussions. But I do think, Matteo, we should. I don't think it's a bad idea to maybe group them, or even just go through which ones do we think we can remove. Like maybe whittle down the short list a little bit more.
And to be honest with you, when I look at Yoshi's Island and Return to Dreamland Deluxe, for sure Yoshi's Island's better than Return to Dreamland Deluxe in my opinion, but Yoshi's Island isn't even my favorite Yoshi game. Yoshi's Woolly World is my favorite Yoshi game. And even at that, I don't see Yoshi in the same stratosphere as Mario or Donkey Kong as like a game in general. Like Yoshi's Island's good. It's great even, but I don't think it's an essential platformer. I don't think it does anything realistically any differently. Baby Mario really bothers me in those games, like getting hit and you have to run around and get Baby Mario. Like I was never really that big of a fan of that, and that's why I really like Woolly World more.
I get what you're saying. I guess I have a bias for this game because Yoshi's Island is like actually, like I think for me is one of my essential 2D platformers. Like I actually think it's one of the best. I actually think, and this is a very hot take, personally, if we're just going by like games, I think Yoshi's Island is better than Super Mario World. Now that is just a personal opinion, but I also see where you're coming from. And if that's the case, if it's just my opinion that Yoshi's Island, because it's not the game on this list I would fight for, so I'm okay taking it off if it doesn't have a chance to make it onto this list.
Liking Woolly World is more controversial, but Yoshi's Island deserves to be on the short list. Like I deserve to be nominated. But I think like if we have to cut one right now, I would cut Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe, because I feel like we've exhausted that game.
Maybe we cut both.
Gino, what do you think?
I'm okay. I'm not gonna be like, oh, how dare you, or anything like that. It's just one of those, just like, you know what? You guys play way more games in this genre than I do. I trust your opinion on this. Where like I have a lot of good memories with this game, but that might not translate into like what everyone else's experience is like from a technical standpoint. I played them because you guys were playing them, and it was fun.
And I think the other thing to think about, like with Kirby and Yoshi, is both of those games are very chill, and the series are very chill. And the series, I think, when you think of like Mario or Donkey Kong, the average Mario and Donkey Kong 2D platformer, I mean, okay, Mario is a little bit more muddied because it had 4 New Super Mario Bros. Game, but let's just pretend those are all one game. The average 2D Mario and Donkey Kong are exceptional. And then there's the ones that are like masterpieces, and then there's the ones that are middling, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the average Kirby and Yoshi tend to be more like great. And then there's the really good ones are like really good games, probably on the level of like some of the Mario and Donkey Kongs, but I don't know if either of them, from what I'm hearing, at least from your perspective, because I thought Yoshi's Island hit this height, but that seems to just be an isolated opinion. But for the most part, the series, I don't think its highs are as high as the highs of Mario and Donkey Kong, is where I'm getting at. And so I think it's okay to say like, okay, these games are fantastic. We've recommended them, but they don't sit with the games that we've already put down there. Okay. In that case, we can continue because we have 7 games and we have 3 spots. So it's, again, a question of what do we think represents this list in a diverse way, and which ones are the essentials.
So, for clarification, are we counting Shovel Knight or Shovel Knight Treasure Trove?
I guess that's what you have to ask yourself, right? Like,
if we considered Kirby's Dreamland, a Return to Dreamland Deluxe, I feel like it's safe to include Treasure Trove.
Yeah, the thing is, like, if you bought Shovel Knight when it came out as Shovel Knight, then you have Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. The only way to get the campaigns separately is to buy them separately, right? Like, so if you had not bought Shovel Knight when Shovel Knight first came out, then they released, like, Spectre of Torment as a standalone, and the multiplayer mode as a standalone that you didn't even have to buy Shovel Knight to play, but, like, most people who own Shovel Knight have access to all the content. It took a while to come out, but like now, like if you buy Shovel Knight, you have the full treasure trove. So I do think you should consider the full treasure trove.
Well, in that case, in terms of value, I think it's by far there's the most amount of content in that game than any of the other games on this list. That has to be worth something. So
it definitely is. And it's hit or I was gonna say it's hit or miss, but I don't even think it's that miss. Like I think the miss is that Plague Knight's campaign is the same game as Shovel Knight's campaign. Like in terms of the levels are the same, but you're playing as a different character that has different mechanics. Versus Spectre Knight and King Knight are the same themes for their levels, but like a very different campaign with a very different set of platforming challenges. So, the thing at the end of the day is I have a massive bias toward Shovel Knight, so I'm of course happy to put it on this list, and I personally do believe it should be on this essentials list. But I also don't want to push too hard for it because I know I'm the only one who's fully played it.
I attribute Shovel Knight with this sort of renaissance of 2D platformers that we're in right now. Even though I didn't finish the game, I know so many people that love this game. Even in the industry, it's like seen as this darling of a game. It's like Shovel Knight is the indie, right?
Everyone was playing it when it came out.
And indie games are what kept this genre going, even though there was less of the big companies putting out these games. Like Capcom does not make 2D platformers anymore, and they made all these amazing 2D platformers in the classic era. And I just think that from a historical, like important standpoint and from a content standpoint, it would be kind of silly to not have Shovel Knight on the list.
That's a very good point. It is one of those kind of like super influential games of our generation. And it was the catalyst for a lot of people to dip into the indie space.
Mm-hmm. And like Shovel Knight and Mega Man are very similar types of platformers. I feel like for those types of platformers, like an action platformer almost, I feel like what I've played of Shovel Knight was more memorable than what I played of Mega Man.
Well, see, that was the pitch I was going to make. And like, I know this is going to be controversial, and I know if we had Riley here, for example, he would
be frothing.
he would not be happy that I was saying this. Because I think he would have a different opinion. I think he would agree that Shovel Knight should be on this list because he's played Shovel Knight with me and he really enjoys Shovel Knight. However, I was going to say, when I was going to pitch Shovel Knight to you guys to be on this list, I was going to say that I feel, because Shovel Knight is heavily inspired by Mega Man, and it does scratch the same itch as Mega Man. And so I was going to say that I think that only one of the two should be on here, and I was going to push Shovel Knight, not Mega Man 3, because I do think Shovel Knight is taking all the best parts of the classic Mega Man games, revamping them and making something that is truly, truly special. And not to say Mega Man 3 isn't a masterpiece and an exceptional game, but just like with Super Mario Bros. 3, it will always be one of those games that's like Mega Man in general will always be one of those games that's like the core of where this genre started. However, if we want to create a diverse enough list, I was going to say maybe we drop Mega Man 3 if Shovel Knight goes on, which I think Riley would be like, both of them should be on, which I think it is kind of like, it's going to be strange if we don't have Mega Man on the list, but I also don't like the boxes of like, okay, we have to have Mario and Donkey Kong and Sonic and Mega Man just because they're the ones who started it. Yeah. So I do think that Mega Man's one of the ones where I'm like, you done good because you inspired games that took your concept and made it even better.
Yeah.
And Shovel Knight is that game. Mm-hmm. As sad as I'm sorry, Mega Man fans, Shovel Knight is a better Mega Man game.
What about the other games that you've played, Jules, like with Braid and Celeste? Like, where do you see those?
I feel strongly about both. I think they're both very exceptional games for very different reasons. Because I'm the only one who knows anything about them, I'm just going to whittle it down right now. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that the one that I keep has to go on to this list. But I am going to remove Braid because I'm going to be conscious of the fact that we're making this together. I'm the only one who's played these two games. And if I'm looking at both those games, like, they're not both going to get on this list if even one of them does, because that's not fair for me to then have more than half the list be games I've exclusively played. So I will say, because I do believe Celeste is one of the best platformers of all time, precision platformers specifically, that I think Celeste should continue to be in the discussion. Whereas Braid, I'm like, I can leave that one for now. Like, I love it. I still recommend it to anybody to play, but I'm going to acknowledge that this is a collaborative list, and I don't want to be making, at least not this genre. Let's be real. When we get to later genre essentials, I may be pushing a little harder for games that only I've played, but for this one, we've all played a lot of them, and so therefore I'm not going to push every single game I've played. Okay. Also, I don't think I would put Braid on here. Based off those 5 that are left, I would put probably all 4 of the ones remaining higher than Braid. Sonic Mania, Yooka-Laylee, and then Possible Lair, Rayman Legends, and Celeste are the remaining 4.
I will. I have one thing to say. So remember what the founding principle of what the essentials list is, and who our target audience is: people that may not be gamers, or people that may not be in
true.
this. Or like, if you're to play these games for the first time, like even going back to like, okay, like when we were talking about our console ones, right? Like the console ones, right? For the Nintendo things, like if you have not played on this console, or if you are a new player, like what would you recommend to someone?
Sure, but that was for the console ones. These are more of a representation of the genre than of the console.
Okay, but still by this principle, like, would you recommend someone, hey, you've never played a 2D platformer before, or if you haven't played a 2D platformer in a long time, would you recommend them precision platforming?
Well, that's the thing, is I don't think I'm recommending somebody who doesn't play 2D platformers. I think I'm more just saying, if you're in the mood for a 2D platformer and you've played 2D platformers, here's some good ones to play, and here's the ones that I think best represent the series. I understand where you're coming from. Precision platforming is definitely a niche, and it's not everybody's taste.
Yeah, it's one of those types of genres as well that's just like, it infuriates me because I'm like, I'm getting punished because I didn't push the button at this specific millisecond or this specific frame.
Yes, and I'll be honest with you. I get why that is frustrating for people. And you know what? Like, as somebody who played through Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, which is lots of precision platforming, and I love that game. One of the unfortunate parts about precision platforming is the frustration. It is the, oh my god, I'm doing this and I'm messing up and I just can't get this right. And that's actually why I like Celeste, because like I said with Super Meat Boy and Celeste are similar in the sense that they're not asking you to go through a whole level without making a mistake. The problem with something like Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, or like my Mario Maker levels that I make, is you have to do these long periods of level without a checkpoint, that if you mess up, you have to start over, and then you get to a point where it's like, okay, now I have to redo this part that I can do in order to get to the part that I'm struggling with. And then when I get to the part that I'm struggling with, I've already spent so much time doing the previous thing that like I'm not as like refined or ready to do it, so I don't feel like I'm learning. Whereas Celeste really cuts that out. Like Celeste is literally like a checkpoint after every single individual challenge. So in that sense, it really gives you the room of like going and going and going until you perfect it, without the need of like, oh, I messed up, now I have to go back to the checkpoint, work my way up to that precision piece, and then do it. And that's why I appreciate Celeste, because Celeste, even though it's super hard, it's not punishing in the sense that it's not like shaming you or making you feel bad for dying. It like very much from the beginning like tells you like you're gonna die a lot. Like that's just kind of what this game is. Like keep going, like you're climbing a mountain, and it's like you'll reach the summit, and that's literally the story, and that's literally what they kind of imprint in you. And then it's very forgiving in the sense that it's like once you complete the challenge, okay, you hit the checkpoint, you're good. Now you're on to the next one. So as soon as you beat it, you're done. Like you don't have to go back and redo the other one. And that's what I like about Celeste, is because even though it's very, very hard, and like, yeah, you might spend like 10-15 minutes on one challenge, it's just the one challenge. You like once you're through it, you're through it.
Yeah, but then there's another 10 or 15 minutes with the next challenge, and it just
yes. So I get it; it's a niche.
Yeah, when Matteo and I, when we were playing through Mario Wonder, right, the final level in the game is very much just a gauntlet using badges and stuff, like the different badges and stuff. Because like Matteo and I, like when we were playing through that, it was just like, oh, okay, we only ever used the parachute hat, and we didn't really experiment with any of the other ones. And now suddenly we have to go through this entire thing, and it was kind of like one of those like Super Meat Boy or Celeste kind of gauntlets, and we're like, dang, this is ridiculous.
But see, even with that one, let me frame this for you.
It didn't give you the checkpoint. It would have been much more bearable if it was the Celeste
if it was a checkpoint. Of every single badge challenge was its own checkpoint, right? Because like one of the ones that I know where you got stuck, because I was stuck on the same part. It was like the running one into the vine grabbing one into the invisibility one, right? And so I would most often die on the vine or the invisibility, but then what would happen is that like I die on the vine, like process, okay, this is what I need to do next time I do this, but then I'd have to go do that previous platforming challenge before I get there, and by the time I get there, I'm kind of like out of practice enough that the precision isn't like fully working, and then I do it, I mess up the same way, and I'm like, okay, I need to remember to do this next time, but then I die a couple times on the previous one because I'm frustrated, and then it just like all piles up, right? Whereas that's what I appreciate about Celeste. It's like it's not making me go redo the previous one. Like it's recognizing like, okay, keep doing this till you can get it right.
I have beef with precision platforming.
Yeah, I'm not saying Celeste necessarily should be on. In my personal list, Celeste would be on, but in defense of precision platforming, I do think Celeste, while it is probably the toughest precision platformer out there, it's also the best at encouraging you to keep going until you figure it out. Like it's very forgiving in the checkpoints. It's not forgiving in its platforming.
What about the two sort of games that we defined sort of as like the hidden gems of this list, like Rayman Legends and Yooka-Laylee and The Impossible Lair?
I feel like we should give Rayman some time in the sun, because it's one of those games where just like not a lot of people picked it up, and because it's just so weird, wacky, and fun, it should be represented somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's for that reason. I don't think it's because Rayman needs time in the sun. Like I said, when we came up with this idea, Rayman Legends was already on my top 5. Like I was already like, Rayman Legends is an essential platformer, and I actually think like we haven't gotten to it yet. I haven't felt like I need to say it, but I honestly think of these 4 games, the only one I'm confident collectively that we like. I feel comfortable enough saying like I believe this should be on, not just because I believe it, but because I think it is the truth, and because I think that you guys will probably agree is Rayman Legends. I think Rayman Legends is a very, very deserving platformer. I think it is strange, it is wacky, it is unique, it is fun, it is challenging, but not too challenging. And the platforming is diverse enough that it almost feels like a Sonic game that's not too fast.
I think that's actually a good way to think about it. I just think like the most fun I've had in a 2D platformer, maybe ever, are those musical levels in Rayman
Yeah.
Legends.
So good. So
the
fantastic.
blues.
Eye of the Tiger, like those are so
Yeah.
fun.
They're so fun. They're so good. Fantastic. And this game is good multiplayer and single player. I've played it through with people and I've done it by myself. And it's a great game. It is fantastic. And it's not just Rayman Legends, it's also Rayman Origins. They're both really good. I played Origins first, then Legends. So
And I
for
did the
me,
other
like
way
I
around.
love them both. But I do agree with you, like Legends improves on a lot of Origins.
Those two games, Origins and Legends, I feel like the leap is just as monumental as Donkey Kong Country Returns to Tropical Freeze. It's not like the first game is bad, it's just the sequels just built upon almost everything in the predecessor. But
Yes.
I kind of agree with you. I think Legends should be on the list.
Okay. Are we in agreement then? I could throw Rayman Legends.
Yep. Now it's 4. It's only one left now.
And there's 3 very deserving games here. Sonic Mania, Yooka-Laylee, and The Impossible Lair and Celeste.
I didn't think it would come down to these 3 for the last spot.
You guys haven't played Celeste, so I'm ultimately going to acknowledge that, and I will be forthcoming in that if this was my personal list, Celeste would be this 5th one. And I actually think that this list would be very representative of what I believe. But I also want to say that I am fully comfortable with any 3 of these games taking this last slot because I think all of them are great. I think Yooka-Laylee is a bit of an underdog and like not a lot of people know about it, but it's still so fundamentally incredible. I think Sonic is super impactful and important to the genre, and Sonic Mania is Sonic at its best. And I think
And
Celeste
it's the fans
again
winning. That's the most
Yeah.
important thing. It's the
Yeah, and I
fans
think-
know what they want to play.
Exactly. And I think Celeste is a technical feat of like, this is what platforming is at its very, very peak of technical precision, and doing so in a way that is encouraging you to continue to try. And so like I think all 3 of these games are very exceptional games and could take this final spot.
So are we cutting Celeste then just because Gino and I haven't played it?
That's up to you two. If you two do feel like especially because you guys haven't played Shovel Knight and we did put Shovel Knight on, if you two feel like realistically like you wouldn't compromise on putting Celeste on, like let's remove it because I'm comfortable putting the other 2 on.
Jules, I will be forthcoming in this right now. I have not finished any of these games. I have not played Celeste. I have not finished Shovel Knight, and Sonic Mania I maybe played like 1 or 2 levels of.
And Yooka-Laylee you didn't play, I think.
Did not play at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've only not played Celeste.
Yeah, so we can remove Celeste. Again, I'm going to say, like, had this been my personal list, Celeste would have been the 5th. But that's fine. It's a collaborative list. So that puts us between Sonic Mania and Yooka-Laylee and The Impossible Lair.
This is so tough.
It is very tough.
I think out of any of the essentials that we've made, and like it always comes down to like 2 games, obviously, but this is arguably one of the toughest final decisions I think we've ever had to make.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like we've barely talked about either of these games realistically. Like,
I do have 1 point to make. If you didn't back Yooka-Laylee, you would not have gotten Impossible Lair.
I don't think that's really relevant, though.
I'm going to be honest, Gino. Sure, you can say if you didn't back Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair would have happened. But if I didn't buy years and years of terrible Sonic games, Sonic Mania also wouldn't have happened.
This is very true.
Ultimately, I think there are pros and cons to putting either
Yeah.
of these on the list. I think like the pros of Sonic Mania ultimately are like its replayability is super high. It is an anniversary game in the sense that it's like very representative of its history, and Sonic obviously is an icon within this genre. It offers something fairly unique within the genre. But I think the cons of Sonic Mania are that putting it on might feel a little bit like we are just trying to appease this idea of like the icons have to go on. Another con I think of Sonic Mania is that in terms of challenge, it doesn't do anything that's like that new compared to the games that came before it, and it's not that challenging. And I also think that another con probably for Sonic Mania, for some people, is that Sonic platformers in general sometimes feel like you don't have to platform a whole ton. You do at certain points, but like there definitely isn't as much platforming in Sonic as there is in something like Ukulele, which is based off classic Donkey Kong games.
And you
then
already
the
have a
pros,
Donkey Kong game on this list.
yeah, well, that's the thing. The pros of Ukulele are that it offers challenge. It's very unique in how it approaches things. It scratches the kind of classic Donkey Kong itch, but some of the cons are it doesn't have that icon value, right? Like it doesn't. It's not like this impactful game to the genre in the same way that like Sonic is this icon. There is a Donkey Kong Country game on the list, so are we putting two things that are too similar? And then also, I just think the impossible layer of it all could be a pro or a con. Like you could call the impossible layer a pro because it's so challenging, but you could also call it a con because it's like, well, is it too challenging? Like, is it too frustrating? Because I didn't beat it either. Like, I'll be forthcoming in that I beat Celeste and I didn't beat a Ukulele in the Impossible Lair. To be fair, that's also because a game came out when I was doing the Impossible Lair, so I gave up earlier than I would have if I had spent more time. I probably would have beaten it with enough time, but it is very challenging. Like, the average player probably would not beat the Impossible Lair.
Just the thing I really love about, like I said, I love the hub world of Ukulele and the Impossible Lair, the world map. I just love the exploration that is in all those levels. Like you have, like you get all the quills, there's the pages. I think the Ghost Riders are in that as well. Like just finding all the secrets within each level is so fulfilling, and it's more exploratory than Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is. But then on the other hand, you kind of do that in Sonic as well with the bonus levels trying to get the Chaos Emeralds. But at least I find that in Sonic, if you blink, you'll miss it, right? Like you have to, you can either play the levels extremely fast and go for the fastest time, or if you want to be exploring, it kind of defeats the purpose of a Sonic game to not run fast, if that makes sense. Like,
Well, here's the thing.
Sonic is all about gotta go fast.
See, contrary to popular belief, me and Phil just had this discussion. Our friend Phil, who maybe one day will be on our podcast, he's fantastic. Because he's a big Sonic fan. We were talking about Sonic Superstars, and one of IGN's big like cons to that game is it's not fast enough. And me and Phil were sitting down as people who've played a lot of classic Sonic, and we're like, but classic Sonic isn't fast. Like speed is there, but it's not about speed. Like actually Sonic didn't become about like the whole idea of gotta go fast originated with the adventure games. And that wasn't even implemented that much into the games. That was more into just like the marketing and the shows and stuff. Like he's always been a fast character, but the classic games are not about speed. Actually, the modern games are the ones that are about speed, like Unleashed and Generations and Colors and stuff. Like those games are about like literal speed. But like Sonic Mania is very representative of what Sonic 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles are, which is yes, you can go fast through certain things. There's the loops, there's the speeders, but there are a lot of like legitimate platforming spots where you are going slow. You're just like you're walking and you're jumping and you're jumping on platforms, and there are slower points. And like most Sonic games are like that. Actually, the classic ones.
The issue I have probably is just because I just don't like the way Sonic controls when he's just walking. He feels so sluggish and he feels really heavy. Whereas when Sonic is running real fast in the game, right? Like when you're at top speed, I feel like that's when Sonic feels the most unique. It's like going through the loops and going over the springs and the jumps and all that. Like I feel like that is where I get the most enjoyment out of Sonic platformers is when I'm not exploring. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a coin flip.
It may be because Yooka-Laylee is influenced by so many different franchises. I don't know. Like I love Donkey Kong Country. Like Yooka-Laylee have a really diverse move set in Impossible Lair, which is the Banjo-Kazooie influence, whereas Sonic Mania is the best 2D Sonic game. It's really tough for me to decide. Like I wish
Listen,
these games went up against any other one and I would have had a unanimous decision. These two games are so close in my internal rankings that like I don't know what to do.
And listen, this is what I'm going to say. This is where I'm going to come from because I just think we could debate this all night. But I think we've reached the natural conclusion. We just kind of have to choose one. And this is where I'm going to come from with this one. I have talked about Sonic Mania a lot. I've talked about how great Sonic Mania is. It's my favorite game. We had so many Sonic podcasts about how Sonic Mania is one of the best games in its series, and Sonic is super influential to 2D platforming. I talked about it in my top 10 games. Like, it's very well known that I love Sonic Mania. And if I'm being honest, I do think Sonic Mania is very representative of this genre. That being said, I want to be unapologetically who we are as the hub world. And I think in the past, we have felt the need to check off boxes that fit with what we think most gamers would consider to be essential. And Sonic Mania is that game. But the hub world loves Yooka-Laylee, and the hub world loves Banjo-Kazooie, and that is our brand. And you ain't going to hear that Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair is an essential 2D platformer anywhere else but here. And Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair is an essential 2D platformer.
That was beautifully said. I was going to give my vote to Sonic because like I played more of it and it was really fun. But okay, I'll take that.
I feel like the surprise though of Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair can't go without being said. Like
that's
we
what
have
it
to
is.
stress that like this game, like people were like had their minds made up about this game because of the original Yooka-Laylee. And then when this game came out, it blew everyone away, and yet still no one talks about it.
It wasn't even because of, like, for me at least, because I liked the original Yooka-Laylee. For me, it wasn't even that the original Yooka-Laylee was whatever people thought it wasn't good, apparently, which I disagree. But for me, it was like, who asked for this? For me, I remember when they announced it, I was like, are you serious? I'm like, people complained about Yooka-Laylee, so you decided to just change its genre, and I was mad. I was like, this isn't what I want. Like, I'm like, I'll play it, but like, this isn't what I want. I want another 3D platformer. And I remember being at PAX. I remember sitting down and trying this game because we're like, there's nothing else like to really play. Let's go try Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair. And I remember being like blown away by it at PAX and being like, holy crap, this game is really good. I can't wait till it comes out. And then playing it when it came out and like messaging you and being like, this game is incredible. Like that, like I was like really like it was a shock how good this game was. Like it was authentic, and like it shouldn't have been because this is the same creators of Donkey Kong Country, and I think Donkey Kong Country like for me, I didn't have Tropical Freeze on my shortlist. I had Donkey Kong Country 2 on my shortlist because I prefer classic Donkey Kong Country, and so for me, Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair is that itch of the classic Donkey Kong Country because I think that there's some of the most fundamental core games to 2D platforming, and I do think Yooka-Laylee, like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, is kind of like one avenue of what Donkey Kong Country could become from another developer who's like, oh, let's take this but make it our own. But Yooka-Laylee the Impossible Lair is like, what if the people who did make those games made another one, and what would they do? How would they improve it? And they, sure, you could say some things about them are a little bit similar, but I do think they're very different games. Mm-hmm. Very, very different games. And I think Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is something unlike the rest of these games. Because one thing that all these games don't have, that Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair has, is Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair it's almost like a trial. Like the whole game, you are practicing the vast variety of platforming challenges in all these little levels so that when you go to the impossible lair, you have to be good at all of them to get through it. Because it's a big level and it literally pulls everything from the whole game, and you have to master everything from the whole game to be able to complete it. It is the ultimate true testament to how good you are at the game, and it's something that I feel other games are missing. Like that's what Mario Wonder for me, right? Like I did the Star World and I came away still thirsty, being like, I don't think they went far enough with these concepts because they could have challenged me more with them. And sure, like some of the later Donkey Kong and Shovel Knight and Rayman levels are tough, but there's still these short levels that maybe only focus on like one aspect of the platforming or one type of challenge. Whereas Yooka-Laylee the Impossible Lair, it really is like the journey is preparing you for the end game, and the end game is tough, but it's rewarding. So I do think actually, like now after talking about it, I do think that this game deserves to be our last one.
That was wonderfully said, Jules.
It's a very good game. Now I want to go replay it actually.
There
you
you
beat the
go.
Impossible Lair, you got to come over to my house and beat the Impossible Lair for me also.
Sure, because I think that's one of the things. Because now that we talked about it, I'm like, I need to beat this game. But that's the thing about this game, right? Like, I wouldn't be able to go and beat the Impossible Lair right now because it requires you to be seasoned and well practiced. So I will have to go and replay the whole game. So just to remind everybody, our final list of the 5 essential 2D platforming games are Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, Rayman Legends, and Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. You heard it here first at the Hub World, folks. Now, this is going to become a series for us. We're going to do this again in the future. I think the next 2 we're going to do is we're going to finish up the platforming genre. We're going to do 3D platformers, and we're going to do Metroidvanias. We may have some guests pop in for those ones, other than just us 3. But we're excited to do as many of the genres as we can, and we may even have some other essentials lists up our sleeve as well coming up. But that does bring us to the end of today's quest. So if you liked what you heard today, hit that like, subscribe, or follow button. Or if you want to tell us what your favorite 2D platformer is, did you agree? Did you disagree? Do you have one that we forgot? Or one that you can recommend to us? Let us know. And let us know if you have any ideas for upcoming episodes or a genre you would like us to see debate the essentials for. Leave us a comment. We'll see you next time at the Hub, and I'll let Matteo sign us out.
Microsoft, make a new Banjo game. See you, everybody.
Whey!